Jim Duquette is with us, former Major League GM for the Mets and the Orioles. MLB Network radio Sirius XM. Follow him on X at Jim Duquette GM. Brought to you by Flat Stick Pub. Whether it's a date night, guys night, ladies night, or a large group event, they've got you covered. Visit one of their 6 locations across the Northwest, if I can spit it out, at flatstickpub.com. We are inside the Puck Sports Studios, built by Limbach Lumber, serving the Northwest since 1930. Northwest premier supplier of specialized lumber and moldings. Summer is here. That is deck and fence season. So contact the fine folks there at Limbach Lumber, 206-782-3487. Visit them online at limbachlumber.com. Puck Sports Studios built by Limbach Lumber. Good fourth?
Good fourth, yeah. Very good. Very low key. Nothing too major. Some fireworks keeps the dog up. But, the dog's getting older now, so she's used to it.
Yeah.
How about
dogs? Dogs do not like it, do they?
No, they don't. They do not like the fireworks, but that's all right. I got to ask this question. Let me ask you this.
Yep.
Would you rather watch fireworks or light them off?
I'm a watcher, not a lighter.
Okay. I grew up lighting them, and you have to be very, very careful, and I am. It does come with potential hazards. So I have stories of growing up in my days in Massachusetts where I was lighting them off in the neighborhood. And the police had to come and stop us from lighting them off. So yeah, I have that in the background there. Nothing really serious, but there was some concern among our neighbors.
Okay, all right, but everything is good now.
Everything is good now. We have a little cul-de-sac here. We'll light some off. I didn't light any up this year. But I have in the past, and my kids enjoyed it. But it's time to turn it over to our other neighbors. Our neighbors were lighting them off the other night, so I'm glad to pass the torch to somebody else.
Yeah. Well, no fireworks for the Mariners offense.
It's a good segue. Professional.
I know. It was a professional segue, wasn't it? They continue to struggle. They're striking out. They're not getting any runs across the board. They've got a lead that has gone from 10 games, right, Jim? Now has dwindled as we record this on Monday, July 8th. It's dwindled all the way down to 2 games, and they are leaking, right? They are leaking oil right now. How do they, and what can they do to possibly just plug this major leak that they've got going on right now?
Well, there's a couple of things that you look at this, and I think we've reached a point where some of these guys who they thought were going to be everyday players, they shouldn't be getting everyday reps. I think you got to start there. I know they're trying to get internal success with their guys until they trade for a couple of guys. It's going to take at least 2 players to upgrade this offense. One's not going to do enough unless it's a hugely impactful guy. And I don't even know who that is. Cody Bellinger, I'm not sure he's available, but we mentioned him in the last 2 weeks. But I'll give them one example. Like Bliss needs to play more. He's not the answer, but he's 100 points better than Polanco, as an example. Yeah. Polanco shouldn't be playing as much as he is. You could bring back Locklear. Locklear wasn't any great shakes either, but he's better than some of the guys that they're marching out there every day. Something to just mix up and upgrade the fringe of the roster until you get more there. You might get something there. Julio looked like he was starting to heat up that last game of the Orioles, and then he gets injured. That's a shame. Hopefully, he comes back after the off day and it picks up where he left off, because that's the guy. He doesn't have any protection in the lineup, as we've talked about, but he looked like that just a glimmer. Maybe it was a sparkler of what he used to be.
Oh, I see what you did there. You mentioned, I'm with you on the Polanco experiment's got to be over. It's just they got to move on, and you know what? They tried, it just didn't work. He's hitting 189. He's got a slug. He's slugging 284.
OPS is in the 500s. Like 500. That's absurd how bad it is.
Yeah. Why not hand it over to Dylan Moore? Because I have my doubts of Ryan Bliss. Why not just give it to Dylan Moore and say, you know what? We don't know if it's a bigger sample size. We know he can play a bunch of different positions. We'll figure it out, when we have to mix and match. But why not just give it to Dylan Moore and let him run with it?
Yeah, I mean, you could do that too. The one thing that's hard is, when you get, the temptation, and we talked about this, I think, with Toronto, but the temptation is when you go and your offense is bad, sometimes you sacrifice offense or sacrifice defense for offense, right? And so can Moore handle the position defensively, or is he gonna have to really out-hit his mistakes there? Sometimes he's better off, I think, moving different positions. and not necessarily having one. I don't know the answer to that, but that's where my only question would be, if you put him there at second base,
Yeah.
He is an upgrade offensively, but does he cost you more on the defensive side too? That's the one thing that I would kind of throw out there.
Yeah. At this point, though, are you willing to sacrifice maybe some defensive plays for offense? And I would just say, the one knock on Bliss is that he wasn't really good defensively.
Right.
And
right. No, I think it's fair. Fair. Yeah. I think see, all the time you are forced with that in the front office and the manager's seat. At what cost do you sacrifice offense for defense, right? And more, especially when you're built around pitching, you tend to err on that side of, let's stick with the defense. We know it'll be a tight game, but I'd rather win a 3-2 game than lose a 6-5 game. Mm-hmm. At this point, you need some kind of shakeup to the lineup, and I think that's where we're well past that point now where, pitching and defense is winning games for you because it's not working right now. You do go through these stretches where, and I do think it's impacting the pitching a little bit. Guys come to the ballpark knowing that they have to be almost perfect, bullpen wise, starting pitching wise, for them to get any type of semblance of a win, and that is hard to do from a pitching side of things. Day in and day after day. So that worries me a little bit moving forward until they get more offense.
Yeah, well, and besides Polanco, which they don't have to owe him anything, and so they can just move on from him. Do you get a sense of that happening soon? Or people you talk to?
Sense. I did not get that sense, anytime soon. But it is to me. So, when we talked to Jerry recently, and we have Scott Service on later this week. So for next week I'll have updates. I think talking to the manager there. I think they're still kind of stubbornly sticking to the pitching and defense side of things until they can get offensive reinforcements. But to me, that's where I tend to put in my my own opinion sometimes versus what the team might actually do, and we're at that point where you're just the offense is just lacking too much. You can't do this anymore.
What I mean, we've talked many times before about improving this team. I mean, it's not one or two players away, but I mean, right? I mean, or maybe you tell me it is, but right. I mean, it shouldn't stop them from trying to get those one or two players, correct?
No, it shouldn't. Listen, Taylor Ward, Luis Robert, those are the two, and Mark Canha potentially with Detroit. Those three are, I think, the best outfielders out there. If Texas decides to move an outfielder, they're only talking right now about Leody Taveras. He's not an offensive upgrade at all. He's having a down year. Jesse Winker's a guy that can play the outfield. He, with the Nationals, he would be, but you guys saw them already.
Wouldn't that be something if they brought him back?
Yeah. So you can't do that. That's one of those things here in Baltimore. They had Jack Flaherty last year. It turned out to not be good. He's pitching really well this year. You can't go down that road if you're the Orioles because what you saw didn't fit last year. So you're better off going in a different direction. That's the same thing with Winker. You can't do that. So I think I've seen Justin Turner might be available. And he could go and play some first for you. He is an offensive. He's been an RBI machine. He's at the end of his career. He's 39 years old. He's had a down season too. Unfortunately, it's not a huge upgrade, but I feel like there is still something left in the tank. So you might take a chance there. The cost wouldn't be all that great either. So, but those are the names. Jazz Chisholm. We talked about him a little bit. He's athletic. I'd love to see him because you'd have him under control for a little bit. So. Those are the type of guys that I think you're going to continue to hear until some of these other teams decide that they're going to be sellers. So,
you expect Toronto to sell?
So they're in that position where they have been slow to react. I checked in with them recently. They're still in a holding pattern, but I've talked to other teams where they're starting to have conversations about, hey, if this keeps going this way, we're going to sell. So it's, everyone's trying to hedge their bet in the hopes that they go on a 4 or 5 game or 6 game win streak. But I just don't see it with Toronto, and they're falling back. Since we've spoken, they've fallen back even further.
Yeah. The Guerrero cost again. Let's start with Vlad Guerrero. What is the cost on the open market for him?
Well, so this is all if they're going to move him, right? They Ross Atkins, their GM, came on my show three weeks ago, said they're not moving either of those guys. The two they have under control. They want to try to sign them up maybe this winter.
Okay.
Vladdy and Bichette, I'm talking about. But with Vladdy, it's going to have to be two impact. It's going to have to be Ford plus. Top, probably the top five or top, certainly a top 10 in addition to Ford. They might even ask for a Ford Hancock. You're not going to do that, in my mind. But that might be the cost for Seattle. And so it's going to be expensive, and that's why I think most teams when they check in on Vladdy, while they would love to have him, he's heated up here recently. Like the last 3-4 weeks, you've seen his numbers.
Sure.
I've seen his numbers skyrocket. He's now an all-star, for them. So you're selling high. You're trying to sell high if you were to sell him here, but I don't have any indication that he is going to be made available at this point.
Okay, so you think, despite all the smoke, you believe what Ross Atkins told you on your show, that you believe him. You don't think that they'll move Bichette or Guerrero.
It doesn't sound like it. Again, it's things change. We talk about it all the time, but
Sure.
Right now it seems like they're free agents to be like Kikuchi, Danny Jansen, that type of guy. Turner, because he's older. I think they have him for another year.
Sure.
They would certainly move him. Chris Bassett is a guy. He's got another year in his contract. I believe that Seattle's not looking for starting pitching, but just in general, they're looking. They would consider moving that. And I think there's one other free agent I'm not thinking of at the moment, but that's what it seems like they want to go. And they're looking at this, according to somebody within Toronto's organization. They're looking like this, like it's a down year, like the Yankees had a down year, didn't make the postseason last year. Down year for St. Louis, they didn't make it. They're looking at it more as the aberration than the rule. It's going to drive Blue Jays fans nuts, but that's the indication, and that's the way they've been acting here. In terms of their trading or not trading guys.
You brought up the name of Harry Ford just a bit ago. What it would cost to get Vlad Guerrero, Ford, and another top prospect, or even mentioning Emerson Hancock. Speaking of Ford, just the other day, he was taking some playing time out in left field. It's a guy who's never played in the field other than playing catcher. He catches and then he DHs, and has always been resistant, at least in the past. I interviewed him when I was back on radio. No, I never even thinking about another position. I'm a catcher. Is this now? He says it was his call to go out and play in left field, that he wanted to do something other than DHing, be a little bit more versatile.
Right.
You think that's the case, or are the Mariners trying to show that he can be a versatile player, shopping him and putting him out there for other teams to see?
Most of the time on this, when a guy's playing, his primary position is a catcher, and he's shown reluctance to it, and then all of a sudden he says it's his idea to go out there, it's because he sees his pathways blocked and he's trying to create versatility for his own team. To play in Seattle at some point, whether it's this year or in the future. Because Raleigh's, I know Raleigh's having a down year, but he's still a 30-homer, catcher behind the plate. He's good defensively, throws runners out, is a good framer. I like, whenever I see him back there. So, to me, if you're Harry Ford, you'd have to be a fool to think that you're going to come up here as a primary catcher, unless there's some kind of trade that happens there. So, I like the fact that he's at least creating some versatility. I'd love to see what it looks like. Most of the time, Kansas City had one of their top catchers, MJ Melendez, moved to the outfield.
Sure.
Because of Salvi Perez, similar type role. I know Cal's not Salvi Perez, but he's an established major leaguer. And MJ Melendez has turned himself into a solid outfielder. So it's been done here in the recent past. I think the Pirates did it with their number one pick, Henry Davis. So that's another example here recently of catchers going to the outfield. So on the surface, you'd like to at least see what it looks like and see if that is an internal upgrade for the Mariners.
Do you like him? And I don't know how much you've seen of him, or I know
plenty about game.
Plenty about Harry Ford. Do you see him as an outfielder, or do you see him as a third baseman? Or maybe a second baseman.
I don't see him as an outfielder. I see him, but that's why I'd like to see him out there, because good athletes can handle any of those positions.
Sure.
Most of the time, moving catchers, you see him play the corners. You see him go to third, see him go to first. Very rarely we see him go up the middle. Biggio did it. Biggio went catcher, second base, center field.
Right.
Hall of Famer. But those are very, very rare. I don't remember anyone else doing that since. I remember my old buddy Todd Zeal went from behind the plate to third.
Okay.
More recently, Josh Donaldson has done that from catcher to third to first. If I were looking at, in this situation, I wouldn't be surprised if they looked at him over third base down the road to see what that looks like as well.
Yeah. The the odds that you think he gets moved?
I think they're pretty high, and the reason why I say that is they cannot let anybody derail their season. Like this is one of those, even as good as it's been, and I know the fan base is getting restless. They're still in first place, and you can't, when you have this type of pitching staff, and health is fragile, especially in the rotation, that you can't afford to say, well, you know what, we'll ease back on the throttle, and get a lesser guy offensively in this team and see where it takes us. Like, they need impact this year, and that for me, that's just to hold on to the division or to get into the postseason. If they throttle back and put a governor on their trades here, I don't know if they're going to make the postseason. Like that's how tenuous I think it is right now. So, that to me is something that and that means leaving him out there vulnerable to a trade. But this is where the Mariners are at the moment.
If they were, I mean, I know there's a lot of games to be played, but I'm just bringing this up. If they are to falter and cough up this lead and eventually don't make the postseason, we've talked about this before, that you really need to win this division in order to get to the postseason. I know they could, the opportunity would still be there for a wild card, but I mean, it's, it gets tougher for them if they don't win the division. I mean, do we start talking about wholesale changes with them? It's 9 years and it's one playoff appearance.
I mean, I do think that, that would be on the table. Right now, most of the industry does not view either of them on the hot seat currently. I mean, that changes, sometimes on a weekly or monthly basis, depending on the success of your team, right? So the one that's getting the most pressure right now is in Toronto,
right?
For obvious reasons. If they were to not make the postseason, Seattle, then I think that would be some long and hard conversations for sure. Because again, you look at the track record. While right now you feel like you're trending in the right direction, and you get into the postseason, it'll be 2 of the last 3 years. If I were in Jerry's shoes, I'd be asking for an extension at that point. If you don't get in, this is one of those things where you keep your head down under the desk and hope that the owner can't find you.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah, I'm not out. I'm out to lunch. Don't talk to me. But yeah, I mean, I just think that 9 years is 9 years of plenty of time to get this turned around, and to sniff it, to be in there one time, and then to follow it up to break that streak, and then to follow it up with 2 more straight seasons where you don't make it. And I think there's a lot of pressure on both of them. I think so. Certainly more pressure on Jerry Dipoto. Probably than Scott Service. I can see them maybe at the end of the year saying, hey, we'll move in a different direction with our manager. But then part of me finds that hard to believe, right, Jim? Because they are so connected, those two. It just feels like if one's going to go, they're both going to go.
I think they're attached at the hip. There's some places where they're not. This more than most, they're attached at the hip. I mean, they've been together forever, right? Even going back to Arizona. I mean, it's been almost 20 years. And so, and the hard part is though, when you do, if you make a change with both, for an owner, it doesn't happen very much, because, you end up having to hire the GM first usually and let the GM do the vetting for the manager. But it's a lot of uncertainty, in disruption within your organization. But again, if you only had one successful season in 9, I think everything is on the table in that regard. Yeah. So wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah, and I think if that scenario were to play out, I think one thing that would no doubt would be a topic, would anger a fan base, this fan base in particular, because at the end of the year, their attendance numbers are going to come out. Their attendance has been way up this year. They just finished a series with Toronto in a homestand that was packed almost every single night. People were there, and what's going to happen is that they're gonna have a good attendance turnout for 24, which means money, and people are going to be like, wait a minute, you're not going to make a change because there was a lot of people in the butts this year,
right?
And so business side of things was good, but the product on the field wasn't good, and yet you still haven't made a change. Are you serious about winning, or is it about making money? And this narrative out here,
right?
And the narrative out here is that this ownership group is only just concerned about making money.
Right. And, kind of, you marry that with how Jerry Dipoto kind of butchered that press conference at the end of last season,
Correct.
Trying to win 54% of the time, which is basically mediocre. In a lot of people's minds, it's just low enough to not make the postseason, or in most years in the American League anyway. And he took blame for that and said he could have said it a lot better for sure. The goal it's keep it simple, get to the postseason, and that's why with the fans being there and supporting the team, that's another reason why. I think that almost anybody in that system is expendable when it comes to making a trade. This is your window, and you can't afford to let these things go by the side. And most GMs, including Jerry, know that and are going to be aggressive. So I don't have any indication outside of the fact that the supply and demand might impact that. I know he's going to be out there trying to make some kind of significant trade.
Jim, we've talked a lot about offense being down, for the Mariners, and you've always been quick to point out, well, listen, offense is down across baseball. Look at the overall OPS, and we went over that last week. Do you think they start talking about stepping in again?
Yes.
And changing some things? What would they change?
So, I think that some of the shifting and the overshifting, it's prevented the numbers from getting worse. So the infield overshifting that we've seen, in the past, and they limited that to 2 on each side. I don't think they went far enough. I think there's a proposal out there where you put this little pie, a pie piece behind second base. The point of the pie is at second, and it fans out.
Sure.
And you don't let the shortstop and second baseman go anywhere near behind the bag, the further back they are. I think they're going to have to do something like that. And the other thing they're going to have to consider, Jason Stark of Athletic had a really good article on this where they talked about the positioning of the outfielders. The athleticism in the sport has kind of gone a little bit by the wayside because of all these the metrics in the positioning. These outfielders have cards in their hats on where to be. Used to be,
right.
They'd have to go on their own and figure out where they're positioned. Now it's very precise, and you're seeing bolts that are being caught. You're seeing guys play deeper than they normally do. So anything that is hit, it lands in front of the outfielders. They'll have to do. I think that's the next move. It may not be next year, but I think that's coming if these numbers continue to go this way, where they don't allow the outfielders to play beyond a certain depth. They might allow them to position, but you can't start, back a certain way so that, you see more doubles. Doubles are at an all-time, I don't know if it's all-time low, but they're at an alarmingly low rate as well. So I think those are the next moves in addition to kind of figuring out that strike zone automated with the wise.
Would they ever I don't know what else you could do. They do anything to the mound? Can they move the mound back?
They've talked about it. I don't. In the end, I think it's going to be hard. It's to the hitters' credit, they have made adjustments on the velocity. They're hitting velocity, but now here they go with the breaking stuff and the sweepers and all this other stuff. But I think if they move the mound back, which they've tried, they've tested in some of these independent leagues.
What did they move it back to?
They moved it back. I want to say they moved it back by a foot.
Okay.
61 feet 6 inches, right? Instead of 60 feet 6 inches.
Yeah.
And it didn't have the same what they thought would be the intended consequences. They were throwing. I think it was the velocity was about the same. I think it affected the breaking ball more. I can't remember now. It's like 2 years ago. They scrapped the plan halfway through the season. So they didn't like the results that they got. So I don't think that's a possibility, at least right now.
I've heard some suggest that to limit the use of breaking pitches. You limit the use of the slider and the sweeper that you talked about.
Yeah. I mean, you get into pitch calling, pitch percentages that, you're really getting into the art, and you're affecting it that way. I can't imagine that Major League Baseball will get any type of approval from the players on that. If you want to throw 90, like they got a lot of pushback when they went to the 3-batter minimum because it impacted left-handed relievers. And that's a very, very small slice of the pitching brethren, we'll call it. But there's some guys who lost their jobs. There are guys out there that are throwing 60, 70% sliders and very effective and very good at it. I can't imagine that they would go that route too, and limit that. So, I don't think it's going to be in that range personally, but they're going to have to do something, and it's coming. I don't think it's going to be next year, but it's coming because the offense is just kind of going south still.
It's amazing. Anytime that, I would encourage anyone, next time you go to a ballpark, you sneak on down there, but whatever. Get as close as you can to the field, especially behind home plate or first base or third base side, and just watch it. And then say to yourself, because most people, you'll sit far away or you're up in the nosebleeds and it looks like you can hit it.
Yeah.
Just go sneak down one time, tell the usher, I want to go take a selfie down by the field. And just watch it. And I'm amazed these guys even hit 100, like a batting average, because it is so unbelievable. They throw so hard nowadays, Jim. And then this breaking stuff is just, it's out of this world right now.
It's crazy. The big sweeping slider it's unbelievable. And they're throwing it enough where you're seeing the injuries like we talked about recently.
Sure.
Injuries to pitchers, in these at alarming rates, but the velocity itself, it's 7, 8, 9 guys sometimes out of a 13 pitcher roster. There have been calls, by the way, to go with fewer pitchers. You're no more than 13 right now. They're talking about maybe they go with 12. But I think you're risking the injury to pitchers that way too, in terms of not giving guys enough time off in between. So, but there has been talk about that as a possibility where you can't go to the 5 relievers in a game type of thing, or you see 6 or 7 relievers because you go with an opener. Trying to prevent that from happening as much as possible. But I don't get any sense, at least, that teams are willing to go down that route.
Let's some rapid fire. Let's touch on a few things, but before we wrap it up for this week, they get it right with Paul Skeens. Are you excited to see Paul Skeens in the All-Star game? I want to see him start.
Yeah, they got it right. Whether he starts or not, like he deserves to go. He's pitched so well, and he's been on the scene long enough. Like I'm not a big fan of if you've been on the scene for 3 or 4 starts and we're electric, you should be there. But he's been here long enough, in my opinion, and that's always subjective. But yeah, I thought that was a really good and smart move, and I'm glad he's going to be there.
I want to see him go against Henderson. I want to see him go against Judge and Soto. I just want to see it. It's supposed to be entertaining, right?
Yeah. I mean, he might hit 102, 103 miles an hour coming in, throwing one inning of just pure gas. That would be fun.
What did you make so far of, when are all these prospects coming up and they're like 6'5" and 6 and they run like the wind? And the latest is James Wood. He just looks the part there for the National. He was the big acquisition with the Soto deal, right, from the Padres.
Correct. Mackenzie Gore was another, C.J. Abrams. So you're looking at a top-notch starter, their everyday shortstop, and now their everyday corner outfielder. And I think Wood might be the best of them all. He's looked really good. I love his approach. Very calm. He's only 21 years old, 6'6", can fly. Has a great approach at the plate. Like that's a deal that for the Nationals is going to look really, really good. It already does look good, but it's going to look even better over time, I think, when you kind of look at it. In fact, that Soto's not in San Diego any longer. That makes it even worse.
The Jared Kelenic trade regrets for the Mariners. He looks like he's fitting in nicely with the Braves, especially when he's been doing this for a while now with Acuna out. But that leadoff role really seems like that's his spot. That's his jam right now for the Braves.
I pulled some quick numbers on it, and I don't know if I have it here handy quite yet. But Kelenic in the leadoff spot, it's only been 28 games or so, but he's got an OPS over 900. I mean, it's not you take his 2 seasons in Seattle and you add them together. I don't think he gets to 900.
No.
I mean, it's a perfect fit for him right there in that situation, and they've untapped it. To me, the big question I always wonder this when I'm in the front office, like these snippets of success. This is what he's doing now is what you expected him to do or
Correct.
close to it over, and that's why you traded for him, right? You go, all right. So he's done it in a small segment of time. Can he do it over the rest of the season, or what he's done prior? Does that rear its ugly head? And does he go back? To call it basically turn back into a pumpkin. Like that's basically what is he going to be? I'm very curious to see it, but I mean, right now this is way more than you could have expected if you were the Braves.
Last thing for you, who's got the most to gain to make a major move and thrust them in the World Series conversation?
Most to gain, huh? Boy, I mean, it's hard to look at when you look at where Seattle is. They're one of those teams for me. There are teams like that. Cleveland's another. If Cleveland were to go out and get themselves a starting pitcher, they might find themselves in the, having a deep run in the postseason because they have all the other elements. I think the Dodgers, if they found some starting staff, maybe it's their own. So I feel like there's like 5 or 6 teams that you could say, the Orioles. If they got themselves a starter, they can go on a run. It's been a while where you're like, oh, this team needs one guy, and that can help them get to the World Series. I think that's where we are. It's not really where Seattle is. Seattle needs 2 offensive pieces or maybe a third. But I do think that some of these other teams, one guy might be what gets them to the final games, final series.
There he is, the great Jim Duquette, former Major League Baseball GM for the Mets and Orioles, MLB Network Radio, Sirius XM. Follow him on social media, Jim Duquette, GM. Weekly visit brought to you by Flat Stick Pub. Visit flatstickpub.com. Get visit one of the great 6 locations across the area. They got ladies' night, large group event, guys' night, date night, perfect for the family. Go visit Flat Stick Pub. Jim Duquette, we appreciate it inside the Puck Sports Studios built by Limbach Lumber. We'll talk to you next Monday. Thank you, sir.
All right, next week from the All-Star game in Texas. We'll talk to you soon.